Welcome to Dranaissance, where we uncover the ingredients for European industrial success inspired by the blueprint of Mario Draghi, turning today's crises, competition, and lost ground into tomorrow's industrial strength. We call it rebirth with grit and competitiveness with soul. Our today's guest is Marc De Vos. He's CEO of Itinera Institute and a big influential public intellectual on economics, governance, and societal transformation in Europe. A sharp thinker that challenges orthodoxies about Europe's future, blending economic realism with bold institutional thinking. He's author of the book Superpower Europe, that is actually discussing what we will discuss today about the future of Europe, the challenges, but also the opportunities that lie ahead. Marc, welcome today.
Thank you. Way too kind in introduction, by the way.
Oh, no. I'm following you already for quite some time, and that's definitely something which is deserved. Marc, to start with, Europe wanted to combine ecology, economy, and security. Instead, it now faces, many would say, industrial decline, energy vulnerability, and geopolitical, some might say, irrelevance. And definitely with what happened the past days, weeks, months, there is a case to be made for that. When you look at Europe today, as an expert, but also as a European citizen, what is coming into mind? What is happening, Marc?
Existential crisis, need for reinvention, to reconnect with the deep roots of what eventually brought the European Union, which was the desire for the nation states of Europe to create a common platform for development, prosperity, security. In the origin, if you know your history a bit, the first attempt at European unification was political and defense. They both failed in the early 50s. So it's back to that period where we need to get closer in political terms, which means pooling sovereignty, which I describe today as actually rediscovering sovereignty, because we don't have any sovereignty at the moment. As you say, we're basically powerless, and the world is basically dictating everything to us, and we're just reacting. And security and defense coming together. And of course, prosperity is always the bedrock upon which you can do a lot of things, and without which you can do nothing. So it's a historic opportunity for the nation states of Europe to reconnect with the heart of the European project, quote unquote, which is not really a project. It doesn't have grand visions or scenarios. It's just a desire to shape a common future in the conviction that by doing it in a common way, we achieve the best possible outcome for every individual country. And that's that sense of historical necessity, self-belief, that then translates into leadership from a few leading countries who say we are going to do this. And it's going to be specific. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do it that way, now and tomorrow. And we bring others along with us and we move forward. This is what we are lacking at the moment. The real problem for Europe is not we don't have any capacity, we are powerless. No, we have so much capacity, so much untapped potential. The real problem is a lack of self-belief, conviction, and leadership. I'm struggling on a daily basis to try to influence it in a positive way.
You mentioned leadership, and that's something that's popped up in a lot of conversation that we had in preparation for this podcast. Do you think that in the face of the current threats that we are experiencing, geopolitically, economically, and so on, that this could unite Europe and bring us closer together, that common threats, or is it inevitable, or otherwise?
Look, Europe has always been created because of external threats. And originally is because we didn't want to go to war with each other anymore. That kind of is over, right? And then it was under the pressure of the Americans for Europe to get their act together in the reconstruction after the World War. Now we have a lot of other pressures. We don't need the Soviet Union, but we have Russia. America is pressuring us and China is pressuring us. If ever there has been a powerful strategic logic to unite, it's now. And that's why I'm so frustrated by the lack of ambition to do it in one way or the other in a European way. And let me give you one among many examples. Last year, 2025, was a historic year in Europe because it was the year that Germany rediscovered geopolitical and military power. It's the year that the new federal government in Germany said we are going to turn the page on the 20th century, where Germany basically after 2 world wars said now it's over. We're going to pacify. We're going to be a democratic federal nation. We're going to rely on the United States for hard power. We're going to rely on Russia or the Soviet Union for energy. We're going to trade openly with China. And we are going to be the good guys. And then we're only in it to create prosperity. That period is over. We now have the Germany of old back. But instead of doing that almost from the beginning in a European fashion, like they did when they gave up the German mark, for the euro, they basically do it in a national fashion and even in a nationalist fashion. And they throw hundreds of billions of euros into reindustrializing and attracting investment in Europe, basically blending policies that look like Biden's policies, the US president, of nationalism and industrial production in the US, and Trump's policies to say, if you want to be with us, you have to come here. Within Europe, on the European continent. There's such a wasted historic opportunity. And all it takes is for the federal chancellor to have the guts to say we're going to do this for us because we're going to do it with European partners. So I reach out to France, I reach out to Italy. And if I reach out, very few will say, no, we don't want to. And that is lacking. And a generation ago, we had Helmut Kohl giving up the German mark and other things, getting the reunification of Germany, standing hand in hand with Mitterrand in Verdun. That kind of leadership. The fact that we don't see that today is the reason why there are democratic movements that are aimed at basically undermining the European Union, that are Eurosceptic and anti-European, because we don't see the positive vision which appeals to our common destination. And this is what I think we really need to discover is this level of ambition that is a bit historical in its mission, without becoming romantic, because we don't need to be romantic. There's so many burning platforms to address.
But if I hear you, it's kind of the big players that need to step up their game. I hear you calling out France, Germany, Italy. What about the European Union, the European Commission? What is their role to play if in relation to those bigger countries, bigger member states?
Look, it's always a collective thing. But in the collective, certain individual factors play a big role. We've had European Commissions in the past that were way more political than the European Commission that we have today. And the second mandate of Ms. van der Leyen is also, I think, a bit more in the back office seat than in the first mandate. The reason why that is a variety of reasons. You have the personality of van der Leyen, you have the way the Commission operates under van der Leyen, but mostly the big difference is that she doesn't have a lot of space for political leadership. The European Commission can lead, but the Commission really needs to be allowed to lead by a critical mass of member states. And now the political divisions within Europe, 27 countries, all these strategic issues that we just mentioned, Russia, the United States, China, and a few others, they all create a lot of differences of opinion, of outlook, that are also tied to history and geography. Within the EU. And the fact that history and geography and the way you look at your place in the world is back as an intra-European issue is also brand new. It's the first time we have this actually since we started this after World War II, because World War II and the end of the Cold War is basically like the end of history. Fukuyama wrote a book about it on a global level, but it certainly looked like the end of history within Europe. And now history is back even within Europe. And the recent enlargement of the EU that we had after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the reunification with Eastern and Central European countries that were on the wrong side of the Iron Curtain, that is also recent for these countries. These countries are recent in the EU. They are even recent in terms of democratic nations. And that creates all kinds of issues that we really hadn't anticipated. So it's become much more complex to find a space for political leadership within the EU. It's easy to blame from the outside. It's hard to do on a daily basis from the inside. But what really makes the difference is a critical mass of countries with a few important countries saying we are going to do this. And not only are we going to do this as a coalition, because we see coalitions, but we see it as a coalition within the EU, under the umbrella of the EU, and we open it to anybody who wants to join in the EU. And the strange thing about it, that is not happening, is that I'm a lawyer originally. In the EU treaty, you actually have a mechanism for it. You can do advanced cooperation. You can go further, even allowed. You can just do it. You don't need to vote. You don't need majorities. You don't need the complex machinery if you have a minimum of 9 countries. Now, that is feasible.
Okay.
That is more than feasible. So why is it not happening?
No, it's a good question. And I always wonder in the current situation, do we need more Europe? Because in that globalized world of yesterday, but the deglobalizing world of today, I think a single country on its own in Europe, what is their relevance still at the global stage? So do we need each other not even more than ever at this current stage? And how do you see then the dynamics, those power dynamics also at the European level changing? Because we need each other if we want to make a fist against outside powers like US, like China and so on. Yeah. But how do you see this evolve? And are you positive regarding to what is happening? And
of course, I share your kind of voice of, is there any alternative? No, there is no alternative. But the problem is that the things that we now have to do together, the mission, if you like, of a new EU, is security, defense, protectionism, standing up for security, for resilience and so on in society and all these type of things, are things that we've never conceived that we would do them on a European level. They always remained at the national level because we had the luxury of not having to deal with it since the end of the Second World War, because the Americans took care of it, or because we had it frozen in the Cold War, or because it was simply off the table after the end of the Cold War. So now all of a sudden that ask for politics in Europe to come up with that is also new. And so it's not just a question of why are we not doing this at the European level, it's also new to do it at a national level in many ways. And the natural reflex, to the extent that we have one, is that defense and security is national. That's the natural reflex. And if you then throw a lot of money at it, because you need to, through NATO and others, you need an additional kind of mind shift to say, now we're going to have to pull this at European level. So you need to overcome that hurdle as well. And we have to simply observe that there is not the willingness among critical countries at the moment to do that to a sufficient degree, and that there is a gamble. That's my reading of it. The gamble is on several levels. The gamble is, well, maybe in a few years' time, when Ukraine the hot war is over, when Trump is out of the presidency, maybe the world will kind of stabilize to a not as extreme reality, and we have a bit more space again in Europe. That's one gamble. Another gamble is, I'm going to do this on my own, or I'm going to do this with a hand-picked group of countries within and also outside Europe. Think of the UK. And then we're going to claim the European market from that position. We are basically going to take it over. And our companies are going to be the European champions. So the win is for us. And that's also a gamble. And this leads to intra-European competition, which in my book is very unhelpful and is not going to get us very far. So the problem is that, historically speaking, if we have to do hard power, if we have to do geopolitics, we don't have any muscle memory. We haven't been doing this for generations. Well, a few countries have done what's left of hard power in Europe. France with its and UK with their post-colonial realities. That's a bit of hard power. And that's all national. So if you have to do this at a European scale, and you have to do this for your own sphere of interest, your regional position in Eurasia vis-a-vis Russia, and you have to do it globally vis-a-vis the US and China, that's a totally new ball game for us. And so it's much easier, instead of embracing it, to say, we're going to be in denial. We're gonna basically say, well, maybe it's not needed, and we're going to do it incrementally. We're not going to take any bold steps. So there is this inertia from the status quo ante, and the hope that some form of status quo ante might still return. So there are many reasons why we are not doing what we should be doing. But Trump is a gift to a lot of things. It's a gift to Mr. Putin. It's a gift to China. Should be a gift to Europe. Because Trump is confronting us with the weakness of being divided, is confronting us with the consequences of not being able to marshal and project hard power, and is confronting us with the fact that there are no big countries in Europe. There are only small countries. On a global scale, on an international scale, not a single European country has sovereignty. Politico last year voted Trump the most important European politician, right? That tells you something. So, if not now, then when, Let's get the mastery of our own destination back in our hands. For me, it's so self-evident.
We talked about geopolitics. Another thing is our economical welfare in Europe. Industry is crying. Some sectors are really like, okay, should we stay in Europe? Is there still a future here? Policy is often changing, for the better, for the worse, depending on to who you talk to. Europe had that holy trinity in mind, and it's something that I learned by reading your articles. It's climate leadership, super important. Moral authority, that's something that they would like to stick by. And then economic strength. My question to you is, can you reconcile those two, especially given today and what is happening?
Short answer, no. Let me unpack that a bit. Moral leadership, what is that based on? Values and rules. Now, we don't live up to our own values. We don't live up to our own values in the Middle East. We don't live up to our own values vis-à-vis certain conflicts around the world, where we're not positioning ourselves in the same way that we invoke values vis-à-vis Ukraine. And we don't live up to our values for our own fate. We humiliate ourselves in front of Mr. Trump. And the whole world is watching that. So values and soft power and moral leadership, we have basically forfeited it. Economic strength. Well, yeah, we have an economic strength. It's a legacy strength. It's based on size. The fact that we have accumulated 80 plus years of peace and therefore have become a very prosperous, wealthy part of the world. And if you have close to 500 million people in that region, that creates weight. That's the economic weight that we have. The economic weight is not based on potential, on momentum, is not future-oriented, it's based on the past. And the future orientation is what is lacking and what we are in dire need of addressing, and what Draghi and others have developed I think, very sensible proposals and strategies for. And then the ecological part, which I think intrinsically is a very valuable part. It's just, it's almost humanistic, if you like. We live on a planet, we have to take care of the planet. But it was based on a number of implicit assumptions. Implicit assumptions about, we would have cheap energy. And so therefore energy transition would be economical. Two, we would not have to worry about war and security. Because if you have to do that, then you have to marshal a lot of funds for other purposes. And you also need some very dirty technologies. Those things have proven to be, mistakes. And the question now, let me put it this way. If we take your ecological angle as the Green Deal. The Green Deal, which we can talk about that as a separate issue, which is aspirational and did it make sense or did it not make sense? But let me put it this way. Would anybody come up with the Green Deal as a European priority today in 2026? And the answer is no. Because everybody knows we have other fish to fry. And the Green Deal is going to be a very, very, very costly and complex distraction. And that is the problem for the and. If the implicit assumptions change and you have to reinvent yourself because you are now, instead of energy secure, energy insecure, and dependent increasingly on very high cost alternatives. which basically make a handicap for everything, including energy-intensive industry, of course, that is not easily overcome. It's almost a fact of life, that handicap. If you now have to wage war, total war, it's not just a hot war that you help Ukraine with, it's also a cold war and a hybrid war. It's a cold war in the old style and a hybrid war with technology and security and what have you, and democracy and propaganda. You have to do all that. And then you have to manage the deglobalization, the reinvention of trade. You have to manage Mr. Trump on a daily basis. There is simply no bandwidth, let alone a budget, a strategy space, to say on top of that, we are going to push an agenda through the entire economy, which nobody else is doing in the world. And we're going to come out of this not just alive, but competitive and potentially global winners then. And last but not least, the assumption of the Green Deal, of course, and the climate program was that this is part of a global movement. The global movement for the reduction of greenhouse emissions in the Paris Accord and what have you. And that's over. I mean, we have to be honest and realistic about it. I don't like it. I think it's probably a historic mistake for the whole of mankind. But that is the world we live in. At the end of the day, Europe is less than 5% of global greenhouse emissions. And I don't see a lot of rationale anymore. So the combining all that is very, very hard. And you could look at solutions. Can have a whole panoply of potential solutions. But the only real solution would be for Europe to say we're going to go in a kind of a war economy fashion. We are going to marshal so many resources so quickly that we are going to create, in a blink of an eye, alternative energy capacity in Europe. That will be everything. It will be nuclear. It will be renewable with new infrastructure and capacity at scale and what have you. We will do mining. And we're going to do that like we did during COVID for the vaccines, like we did after the war in Ukraine when we blockaded Russia, more or less, not totally. And we created, for instance, in Germany and the Netherlands, in a blink of an eye, in a few months, LNG ports from nothing, from scratch. If you do that as a modus, and you marshal the potential of Europe, the size, the capacities, the know-how, the financial firepower that is in this place, if you do that, then you could say to your industry, bear with us, give us 5 years, and we will be competitive again on energy. You could do that, but it's not happening. So bar that kind of a scenario where you really shift focus and say we are in a different world and we're going to act accordingly. And we're going to do this here, we're going to do this now. And we're going to do this right now. It's action today. We forget all the rest, the rules, the regulation, the processes. We overrule everything. And we do it at a European scale. Yeah? And that's not happening. That sense of urgency is simply not happening. There is a sense of urgency. But it's mouth, it's talk, it's paper. It's not action on the ground today. And that is the political problem for Europe.
Economic, is it not a necessity almost? We are a resource-poor continent. We don't have gas, oil, rare earths are to be found in China.
We don't know. We have never verified whether we have any rare earths. Plutonium is something you can choose to kind of master. Mm-hmm. Russia masters the refinery of and the upgrading of plutonium. And so these are choices. These are strategic choices. If you say we have no energy sources, okay, then I would say then the strategic need for Europe is 2. 1, what I just said. Mm-hmm. 2, make sure you are going to be the champion of the next abundance in energy, because the destination of mankind is for energy to be cheap, abundance, and everywhere. How's this going to work? It's probably nuclear fusion then. Become the champion of nuclear fusion. Throw the kitchen sink at it. No? But it's not happening. Mm-hmm. No? And you could have this type of ambition in industry, in technology that creates the win-win that you were looking for. We are going to be world competing, leading technology, and we're going to be green. Yeah? But for that, you need to shift in a different modus. And this type of action is simply not happening. It's not on the cards. It's not being produced. And therefore, the alternative to say we're going to push down every single company on this continent a certain agenda and so on is simply not going to work. We'll come back to that a little bit later, perhaps.
Can a continent or a geography be geopolitically sovereign without being energy sovereign? Energy sovereignty, is that even possible in this given day and age?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Let me question the assumption. Do we need to be geopolitically sovereign in everything? And my answer is no. And forgive me, I grew up in the end of the Cold War and in the period that we made globalization, where we said, well, certainly a mutual dependence is great. Everybody benefits. Everybody gets richer. It's so comfortable. It has a lot of spin-off effects that are very nice for life, for the quality of life, for living the human existence on this planet, and so on. So let's stick to that. Not all the countries out there, outside Europe, are geopolitical rivals. We need to find common ground and need to nurture deep relationships that are going to be partially geopolitical in logic and not just economic as they were in the period of globalization, where you make good geopolitical understandings and alliances where also Europe brings something to the table. If they have the energy, then we bring certain things to the table, which is the game that the US has always played vis-a-vis oil and gas globally. It's the game that the Russians have always played. It's the game that the Chinese have always played. Is to look at strategic, technological, and economic and energy relationships through the double lens of economic model and geopolitical alliance making and reliability and even geopolitical dominance of certain partners.
I want to chime in on that point on rare earths. Indeed, there's untapped potential here. Greenland we will cover afterwards. But it takes such a while before it is even possible to start a mine, to get the permits. Do we need to speed those things up? Do we want again that processing power, that extraction power that we now basically outsourced? Is that something desirable that we do this here in Europe? But then on our standards, the standards where we think that those are so important for us that they are according to the labor standards that are internationally accepted, according to our green standards, is that something that is desirable to get those things back in Europe? Because you said it, the knowledge is here, the brains are here, but we lack the capacity to scale those things up and to leverage them because sometimes bureaucratic issues are facing those people that would like to initiate that. Do you agree with that? What is your stance on that, Marc?
Well, let me say it this way. I certainly don't want to become dependent on China for rare earths and all kinds of technologies like we were dependent on Russia for energy before. So we have to find an alternative to that. Does that mean we have to do mining here? On the one hand, I refer to my previous intervention. I said, maybe you can have geopolitical alliances that are reliable and that you would like to foster. That's one way of looking at it. The other is autonomy, sovereignty, and so on. I personally would say we need to do both because the one is short-term and the other is long-term. If you decide today to mobilize all the necessary forces to do mining, by the time you actually have a live operation and you have a value chain and so on, because it's much more than a mine, it's going to take you 10 years. Now, my previous point was get that away, get that mindset over, do it tomorrow. What is needed to do it tomorrow? But even then, realistic assumptions is it's going to take a little bit of time. You can't just do mining one day from the next. So I would say, yes, it's important that we explore the mining. And let's see what geology brings. I'm all in favor of that. And it's needed anyway. So if it's needed to happen somewhere where you say, where all the standards of ecological and others are going to be the best in class, and we are going to be very serious about security also and so on. I think it should be happening in Europe. But for that, I think you need some kind of special purpose vehicle that really says from the top down. And I've pleaded for quite a while to embrace a kind of Airbus model thinking in Europe, where you say, what is it that we want in Europe, that we really need and want strategically? In the past, we said, well, civil aviation. We'd like to be, a global champion in civil aviation, and we pulled it off. We made the cluster. We brought in sufficient member states to create it at the European level, and now it's a global champion. So let's do that for a number of technologies and a number of sectors. And if you create a format for it, and you create a special purpose vehicle to then say, then we create something that allows you to overrule for the sake of speed and necessity. And then we create investment vehicles to attract the funding. I think you could really see something happening. And so I'm not giving up on saying we should flip a few switches and just shift a few gears. We've made this nice car, Draghi, other reports. The European Commission has plenty of plans. It's like a car that has been built, but the engine is not running and we're not even in first gear yet. So we need really to accelerate this car. And it's in our potential to do it. So I would say, yes, we have to give that a shot, but we have to be realistic enough to say you can't just gamble on your own sovereignty. And that's not the world I would like to live in. I wouldn't like to live in a world 20 years from now where we say, basically, it's a carved up world, And because think about the consequences that will have. You have to add up digital barriers to all that. So you'd like to see humanity coming closer together rather than drifting apart. So I think we have to somehow, and it fits the EU, I think, to say we want to keep on embracing the good sides of the globalization. This is now over. Globalization is over. But there were some good sides that we don't have to ditch in the dustbin of history. Let's try to keep them alive.
The topic of Greenland, we cannot avoid talking about it. Greenland is a part of Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
Greenland is full of rich rare earths, but of course there is more attached to Greenland. It's also an important corridor in the north. How are you looking at Greenland, and how important is it that Europe takes a real clear stance on it? And how important is Greenland for Europe as a whole?
Yeah. What is it, Greenland? I'm not an expert. I read what you read. Apparently it's a very, very promising country. Also, it's a strategically important region. The Arctic, we have Arctic presence. We have some Northern European countries that have an Arctic presence. So ideally, I think the scenario would be for Europe and America to come together and do this in a coherent, shared way, which really could serve both and could be some kind of platform to build upon for future development of strategic relationships, transatlantically speaking. That would be my preferred scenario. I don't think I personally wouldn't see any benefit in excluding the United States. Trump is somebody who oftentimes hits upon something that has a profound truth in it, but comes up with a totally outlandish solution. There's a profound truth that the position of Greenland needs to be reconsidered in view of the new global order that is emanating. And that we, since it's a European kind of sovereignty thing, that this is something that we would have to answer. It's an example of Europe having to do hard power and having to become a geopolitical player. And the fact that we have lacked in ambition and means that Mr. Trump sees an issue that he feels only the US can redress. So that is the kernel of truth that is in his campaign around Greenland. I hope that we succeed in embracing that truth, creating the very serious commitment in a common interest, and then build upon it. That's what I would hope to see as the outcome. So almost like a NATO-style outcome, where we say, we're going to become more serious about this. We're really going to commit. Let's make a common strategy, as we do in NATO. Let's make a common. We're all part of NATO anyway. It's also security. It's common security. So let's make it a NATO thing. We're going to have a big plan. It's going to be beautiful, is going to be a real opportunity for investment by American companies and by European companies. And long run, it might create all these kind of natural riches that we are going to exploit together and so on. We'll even create something for that and so on. That would be great for me. Yeah.
A lot of things are coming together in Greenland. But I was also wondering, many people have talked already about the clean industrial deal. Mario Draghi's famous report was kind of the introduction for it. It was, I think, really well timed. The question is regarding to the clean industrial deal, if you compare it to the Green Deal, which you already mentioned, are there good recipes inside that? Because I hear mixed reactions. And some players in the industry are saying, yeah, there are good elements, but now it's all about execution. But how are you analyzing what is inside the clean industrial deal? And do you see the voice of Mario Draghi in that blueprint that was laid out by the Commission?
To answer the last question, no. I think it predates the kind of Draghi momentum. I see the clean industrial deal mostly as a symbolic gesture. The gesture that says, well, if we want to green, we also want to be industrial. We're not going to green by basically killing off our industry. That's a kind of a political gesture. Is it a strategy that stands on its own 2 feet and creates the balancing power that makes our industry kind of competitive, attractive, notwithstanding the Green Deal kind of transition that is forced upon it? No, it's a fig leaf. It's too little too late, in my opinion. The things have been going wrong since at least the invasion of Ukraine, when we had the energy shock, which is almost 4 years, and every year there is a kind of big summit that has the same message. This is the year needs to change. So I'm a bit pessimistic about that, if I'm honest. I also think that what is going to make the difference really is not the EU, unless it ditches the Green Deal. It's not the EU, but it's going to be member states that do direct state intervention to reduce the costs and the burdens of their industries. And this is something that is very unwelcome in Europe, because Europe really was created to take the member states out of their economies. Because if you allow them to support their economies and their industries and their corporates, you basically organize unfair competition and nationalism in Europe. Unfortunately, that is what the Clean Industrial Deal is doing, because it's allowing subsidy mechanisms and it's even creating funds for it. So it's a very paradoxical evolution to see the European Commission that originally was there to create a level playing field, open market, take the state out of the economy, stop the nation states from subsidizing, to do the opposite and say, now you have to intervene, you have to support your industry, we're going to help you subsidize. That is not something that is nice to see, and it's very bureaucratic, it's very slow. The tempo is always the issue. So I think the Clean Industrial Deal by far is not enough, but it's part of a much bigger picture now. There is the gradual erosion of the Green Deal. Look at the car manufacturing sector. Look at deforestation. Look at all the process and the regulatory commitments that we imposed upon corporate Europe that are being watered down, the deregulation agenda and so on. It's part of a whole trend where apparently the conviction now is, or the realization now is, that the European Commission and the European countries together, because Europe can only act through the concert of the Council with the member states, had gone too far, and that they had come up with an agenda that looked nice as a kind of aspiration or almost an ideology, but wasn't going to fly on economic terms. And now in the new world reality that we have, and that comes on top of that, not only do you not have a viable economic market to make it happen, you also have the geopolitical consequences. So that's why the Clean Industrial Deal is just part of this gradual movement to turn back the clock, without ever admitting that you have to turn it back. Because at the same time, we're reconfirming that we are sticking to our guns. So I think I don't want to be too pessimistic, because it's good that there is a symbolic recognition and acknowledgement. It's good that we come up with innovative solutions to try to somehow compensate for all this. But the real solution is either to radically shift direction, or to say we are going to, at least to keep our companies competitive within Europe, we are going to create a wall around Europe. And therefore we are going to go at war, trade war, with the US, China, everybody else who doesn't follow the same rules and standards. And this is not going to happen either. I mean, we have CBAM that's going to be implemented, but my prediction is it will be way too complicated. It's never going to be compensating enough, and it will create all kinds of second round effects, including geopolitical ones. And so, look, I don't want to be negative. But I do think that we need something much more drastic, and much more kind of European scale than this approach to say, we're just going to allow you to water down and we're going to incentivize a little bit and so on. That's simply not good enough. And that's where Draghi comes back in. The Draghi was all about having, a major concerted effort for competitiveness, mobilizing also financial market strength, creating more market scale in Europe, allowing European champions to develop, all these type of things. If you could do that, besides the ongoing travails that we have with the energy intensive industries, you could say, okay, there's going to be somehow a new dynamic that's going to help the old dynamic, but that's not happening either. I mean, there's very little traction in realizing the Draghi plans.
You're introducing actually already the next point, which is we have good universities, we have good researchers, we have a lot of brain power that's widely known. Mm-hmm. I always wondered, why do we in Europe, given the fact that we have all these assets, why don't we have, for example, a Silicon Valley? What is lacking that we can enable those investments in key sectors that are helping our European prosperity? That's also something that Draghi is tackling in his Draghi Report. What is holding us back?
Look, this is well researched, and I think it's a variety of answers. And I don't claim to have all the answers, but let me give you a few that come to mind. Obviously, you need an entrepreneurial culture. So you need, I think there's somebody saying about the US, there's somebody crazy enough to start doing that in this garage, and somebody stupid enough to fund it. So you need that entrepreneurial spirit, and you need that kind of animalistic capitalist ambition to fund bets. So there's a cultural element. There is an element, obviously, of a fragmented market. Certainly in digital services, this is a real obstacle, that we are not integrated, that you don't have a single language, and so on. So a fragmented market. In terms of capacity for funding, fragmented financial market. You could look at the lack of very strategic, at European scale, concentrated R&D. We have a lot of R&D, but a lot of it is dispersed. So in the US, obviously, you already have DARPA, defense, which is often the kind of the cradle of centralized innovation development. And you have just more scale and more concentration. If you have, a biotech center, we have good biotech. Ghent, Ghent is good biotech, but put Ghent on the global map. Where is it? You have to take out your magnifying glass because we don't have scale. And so, because we are not integrated, we don't do it at scale. And scale has a certain quality, quantity has a certain quality of its own. And because quality then is a draw for something. It's a draw for money. Quantity is a draw for money. It's a draw for investment. And at the end of the day, you mentioned talent, but let's not forget how much the US owns to foreign talent. Top talent, absolute top talent that goes to the meccas like Silicon Valley and others. So the best and the brightest future super entrepreneurs and so on, they mostly go there. And our top talent, they also go there. And our money also goes there. So I think it's a mixture. I come back to my point of the Airbus model, clusters, scale, visibility, attracting pools of talent and money. And of course, I have a university background, so you also have to look at the role of universities. We have to acknowledge that with a few exceptions, and I'm taking off the map here the UK, with a few exceptions, we are not really competitive with the biggest and the best academic institutions in the United States when it comes to the type of breakthrough research that spills over into innovation that leads to entrepreneurship and so on. It's not that we don't make any effort in that, and I also think we have made progress in it. And you can point to a few success stories. One success story close to us is Eindhoven, where a lot of high tech was developed, a synergy between the legacy of Philips and a technical university. So it's not that we don't have that on occasion, but we do not have that in quite the numbers and the level that the United States has. So all of these things, I think, come together somehow. And everybody has tried to emulate Silicon Valley for a long time. The strange thing about this type of innovation, coming back to our topic of geopolitics, is that now that commercial thing has also now become a geopolitical thing. Mm-hmm. And so the future is also going to be more of a synergy with states, which might give us some opportunity for centralization and scale. If you can say in certain critical technologies and industries, this is going to be public-private as an approach, it gives us perhaps a little bit of an additional advantage if we succeed at creating at the European level.
And do you see there a strong and important role for the European Commission? Is it something that needs to come top-down, where we say, hey, these are areas that are of crucial importance for Europe, so let's collaborate, let's find a place where we can do this and bring those brightest minds in Europe together to work on the most important stringent problems that Europe currently faces?
Yeah. European Commission, coming back to the point of leadership, can be the medium for it. But the real decisions have to be shared by member states. And to achieve that, everybody somehow must have the potential to be part of the winning formula. That's why I say pick a few clusters and do it in the Airbus style, which is also a deal. Airbus is a deal, who gets what and so on. This is how it works. It's a bit dirty. That's the world we live in. But if you succeed then to say, oh yes, this is going to be leveled up at European level, then European Commission can become an engine for you. An engine for funding, an engine for planning and strategizing and so on. Now, the European Commission has done a lot of homework. Draghi, Letta report, Niinistö report on resilience. European Commission has translated these reports into plans. We have developed quite a few instruments, particularly vis-à-vis trade and foreign investment. The problem is implementing plans, using instruments, and doing it at speed and at scale. That's the problem, because oftentimes in Europe, even when it is in a power of the European Commission, think about trade sanctions, for instance, you always need to pass through the council and you need to have a vote that's quasi-unanimous or unanimous to actually get moving. Or you need a long preparation phase before you can start acting. So I think we just have to become nimbler. And speed is a big issue for Europe. It's one of the reasons why member states who might be willing to go the European route currently are not going to go down the European route, because going down the European route means you're going to be way too late. Think about helping Ukraine, the coalitions of the willing, and so on. The bureaucratic processes of the EU, we have to find ways to overcome them, and in certain areas become much quicker on the ball. That's a challenge for us. It's something we have to find a solution for. And you just have to compare with, if you say top-down and public-private, you have to compare with how things can be moved forward in US from Washington and how they can be planned, directed in Beijing for the whole of China. Mm-hmm. And we have to find something similar to come from Brussels for the whole of Europe.
So we need efficiency, more efficiency in the decision process.
Yep.
That's something we need. And
so I was in favor, for instance, when Draghi with his report came. I said, well, let's make him a commissioner extraordinaire, Mr. Draghi, and give him extraordinary emergency powers. And let's say on what fronts do we now want to achieve that type of potential in Europe, by what deadline? And give him carte blanche. Of course, supervisory, accountability, all that, fair enough, carte blanche to overrule. So why don't we do that? This is the urgency mindset that we really need. And that would have created political momentum. And he had, I think, at some point, the moral authority to actually almost pull this off. Yeah? And the fact that I don't think that idea has ever been floated, not to my knowledge.
Nope.
The fact that we have not we don't have the creativity, the innovation to actually think that way. I think is really speaking volumes of the lack of ambition. Make the comparison with the rebuilding of East Germany after the reunification. They created a special vehicle that was empowered to transform the whole economy and the old industries. You didn't do it the normal way because it would have been a mistake. It would never have worked. You would have condemned the country to backwardness. So we need to say we have all the analysis, we have all the solutions, but we are lacking the imagination to come up with the implementation process.
But that's a very interesting idea. More power in one person, definitely in times of crisis,
for a limited time,
for
specific purposes,
on topics that are super important to move ahead and to unblock many of the decisions that needs to be made. Leads me to our final question. And every guest that comes on our table, we ask, do you believe in a European Renaissance, or like we like to call it, a Dranaissance? And what, in your opinion, is the very next thing, most important thing to do?
Of course I believe in it. You have to believe in it. The problem with Europe is we don't live up to our potential. There's so much untapped potential. If we could only find ways of tapping it. I think, and you mentioned a few of our advantages and of our really leadership capacities that we have in this continent. And I also think, and I continue to think, that in the long run, we are going to be, if we stick to our guns, if we do the proper things, we do them right, we are going to continue to be an inspirational model for a lot of countries. Because this place has the mixture of public-private protection and freedom and so on, pretty right even in a global comparison. There are a lot of wrongs, but in a global comparison, is one of the best places you actually would like to be, provided future potential is there. So you have to believe in that, and it's not a question of can we, it's just a question of how. The second part of your question was, what's the most important thing? For me, it's very simple. We need to win in Ukraine. If we lose Ukraine, if the end game in Ukraine is that we have a kind of pro-Russian scenario where Ukraine is not sovereign, is a vassal state, or is perennially unstable, and a platform for Russia to do all kinds of things, and we create, at least a quarter of a century of insecurity and hybrid risks with Russia, and geopolitically we lose. In the face of the world, we will lose, and Putin will win. Therefore, we embolden the Russians, and so on and so forth. If that happens, I think this would be a devastation for Europe. It would be a devastation psychologically. It would be a devastation politically, because I think what's keeping Europe together now is the will not to lose in Ukraine. If you lose, then I think you will see a lot of political division emerging in Europe. And we will be, of course, the target of the big powers to divide us further. In the 19th century, they used to say there was a scramble for Africa, where the big European countries were looking to carve up the continent in their own spheres. You might see a scramble for Europe. where other powers say which part is going to be ours. So I think politically, psychologically, and this is what you need if you want to kind of do reconnect with your own greatness, and you want to really do stuff. You have to have psychological self-belief, and you have to have political conviction. And so we need to absolutely kind of tame that situation, make it a controlled scenario. That is that's really the only thing that we need to get right in the short term. The rest can wait, in my opinion, even. We're going to lose a lot of things if we wait on the rest, but not losing Ukraine, I think, is something we have to achieve.
Avoiding the scramble for Europe. That is something I hope our policymakers will listen to us, because it's almost unimaginable that this could happen, but it is a really valid statement that you make there. Marc De Vos, I really thank you for your participants.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brecht.
Bye.